Everybody, this is going to be a first-time interview. Usually we do a lot of mock interviews, but I got a very special guest on today's podcast. His name is Josh Phillips. You may know him from ESPN Upstate, formerly with Straight Up with Sturge. Now he is on the Huddle weekdays, 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. Coach has a lot of clout, been coaching for a while. Turned over 17 all-conference, 9 all-American players, as well as sending 4 players to the NFL. But he's a very good friend of mine, and a very important issue came into hand today that we would like to discuss. But, Coach, man, welcome to the podcast.
Man, Tyler, I appreciate you having me. It's an honor to be on with you, and I look forward to our discussion tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just like the topic, man, we're going to cut the BS. We're going to get straight into it. Sports world is going crazy tonight due to the president and what he had to say last night. And for those who don't know, he had, some critical words to say that I'm sure you're going to hear in the soundbite that either I'm going to play before or after this interview about the NFL. And also Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors. But Josh, I wanted to bring you on because my podcast, I like to do perspective. And I feel like you're going to bring a different perspective. I don't know if I want to call you a Trump supporter, but yeah, I don't think I go that far. But I know you do rationalize some of the stuff that he say. So I wanted to bring somebody else on. Not to defend them, but bring a different perspective. And I've been seeing you all day arguing with people on Twitter, but go ahead and let's go ahead and kick everything off. Say what you got to say, my man.
Well, first of all, I and I don't mean any disrespect by this because I don't. You and I haven't really talked politics before, and I don't mean any disrespect when I say this, but myself and people like myself are liberals' worst nightmare. And what I mean by that is I'm not ashamed to say that as a white American, I voted for Obama. I thought he was the best person for the job. I thought the social significance of what he stood for and having the first black president was something that our country needed and that was ready for. And not only that, but it seems that a lot of people that are, I would say, in the same mindset of myself, and that means middle-class, educated white folks, agreed. And Obama was elected by a lot of people, both white and black, in a landslide. I know most people don't remember the election, but it was a rout over McCain. It was a little bit closer with Mitt Romney, but in the end, there was no way that Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan were going to defeat President Obama. But at the same token, I also voted for Trump in this past election, not so much because he was the perfect guy for me. It's that I had zero faith in Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. Now, what does that mean as far as, well, I'm a liberal's worst nightmare? It is the fact that I don't have an agenda when it comes to politics. I try to vote for the right person who I feel is the best. If I've got 2 candidates, I've got to pick one that I feel is the best to lead, although one of them may not necessarily be the one that I would choose.
Right.
So that's the way I found myself with Trump. I didn't vote for him in the primary. I voted for Dr. Carson in the primary because he stood for everything that I valued.
Right.
And so that's who I voted for. But cutting to the short of it is, I think there's a lot of it. There's too much of a division in our country right now that's attributed to racial issues. And look, I understand why that's happening. The later part of President Obama's administration, we had the Ferguson incident, and then leading into, and then we had Charlotte and that whole debacle, and then leading into President Trump's office, we had the whole Charlottesville thing from last week, or excuse me, a couple of months ago. So I understand where that plays, but at the same token, people have to back up and realize that Hillary Clinton was white too. So it wasn't like we had two diametrically opposed people, although they stood for different agendas. But you really had two white people fighting it out for the White House. So when I start hearing things about race and how racially divided our country is, and look, let me be perfectly clear. Does the United States have an issue with race? Sure we do, because in my estimation, racism is a sin, quite honestly. I mean, the Lord tells us that how can you hate your brother who you see and say that you love your Father in heaven who you don't see? Those things don't equate. But it's not just the United States, but I think more importantly, it's more of a marginal thing, meaning you're going to have the 0.5% of what I call the kooks on the left and the right that is going to get a lot of the headlines. Now, I will say this. President Trump is not a politician.
Oh, we know.
And what does that – yeah, I mean, so what he's going to say is – and you know what? One of the things that really impressed me is Farrakhan said that Trump was going to start things in our country because he's not beholden to any constituents because he's self-made, meaning, you know, Hillary had hundreds of millions of dollars that people funded her campaign, so she was basically having to do what they told her to do.
Right, answering to them.
President Trump, exactly right, whereas President Trump, he's not beholden to anybody. He's a billionaire, and I think that's what people are having the hardest time with, is that he says what he thinks regardless of whether it's politically correct or not. And unfortunately, in our society, we've kind of developed this thing that, well, if I say somebody's racist, I'll get them to back off. Well, in today's world, and I hate to say this because when there is true racism, it's almost like somebody has cried wolf, meaning that when there is something legitimate that's gone on, people just kind of gloss over it as, oh, well, you know, here we go again with the proverbial race card, when in fact there is a serious problem going on. So when I see these things that go on, and look, I don't have a problem with Golden State not wanting to go to the White House. I don't have a problem with any athlete making the choice that they don't want to go. Okay, that's your right as an American. It's part of being free. But at the same token, you've got to give other people those freedoms, even though you may be diabolically opposed to what they have to say. And here's a case in point. I cannot stand any of what those people did in Charlottesville. And I totally disagree with everything that they stand for. I totally disagree with everything that the Confederate flag stands for. I totally disagree with any of that white supremacist stuff that those people stood for. But as an American, just like I've got the freedom to voice my opinion concerning them, as much as I hate it, they have the right, as long as they're being peaceful, to say what they feel. Now, you don't have to agree with them, and I don't. Believe me, I cannot stand that segment of our population. So I think what I'm starting to hear now, because of the media and everybody, quote, having their so-called rights, what I feel is getting lost in this whole situation is that people are trying to put their rights above what is doing the right thing, meaning having respect for your fellow American, regardless of what you think you believe. We can disagree, but I can still love you and respect you, and we can have a conversation to where we're not taking personal shot. Now, you referenced the fact that I'm on Twitter, And I was getting into it with a lot of people on Twitter. Well, of course, they wanted to come after me, and they think by insulting me, by taking personal shots and all of that, that somehow that's going to insult me. And it doesn't, because I'm used to it. Like with the fat jokes, everybody knows I'm a big guy, and that's okay. And when you put yourself out there from a opinion standpoint on something that you stand for, you're going to have to take the heat with it. And so I accept the fact, that people are going to make personal insults and all of that, and they want to get personal. That's just kind of part of it. Now, I know you've got a particular perspective on the verbiage that President Trump used.
Yes.
And quite honestly, I agree with you. I understand the message that he was saying when he used the SOB thing. I agree with you in the fact that the President of the United States shouldn't be using that type of vernacular from that particular forum, because it is an office that is respectful. But at the same time, the people that are mad at him for making those statements, like LeBron James and Jamel Hill and people like that, they don't respect the office anyway, and they have made it perfectly clear that he's not their president. So then, by that token, you can't then hold him to the respect of the office if you don't respect the office anyway. That, to me, there's a disconnect there. Now, again, they have the right to have their opinion.
Yeah.
And look, I respect that, but I think a lot of times what's getting lost in this is that you've got a man that has very strong convictions about what he considers right and wrong. And it's easy to say, oh, well, he's just a white supremacist, or he's just a racist, or he's just that. I personally don't see that, okay? Mainly, I see a guy that's an American that is for Americans first, whether they're black, white, purple, whatever. He wants to put all Americans before anybody else from the outside. But I think the biggest thing that Americans are having problems with is that they're not used to a man being the president of the United States that doesn't think and act like a president, or our perception of what a president should be. And I think that is what people are getting lost in, the fact that of what he is. And unfortunately, in our society nowadays, it seems that people, the kooks from the right and the left, seem to be getting all of the publicity, and everything's getting dumped that it's all of his problem. Look, these problems have been going back for hundreds of years, and it's just now come to the forefront because we can talk about them. And I think that's something that's different. Is, see, in the past, whenever somebody would make the comment that somebody was racist, white America would get afraid and withdraw and be like, oh, let's prove that I'm not racist. Mm-hmm. Well, because of the way our society has grown, and look, we've come a long way. Now, do we have a long way to go? Absolutely. Absolutely. But at the same token, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that's the way everybody is. Because if that's the case, look what's going on in the NFL. I mean, you've got 80,000 people from all different ethnicities coming into a stadium. We would be killing each other if that's what we all felt like. So I think a lot of times is we've got to step back from the ledge, take a deep breath, and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we've got problems in this country, but, man, we've come a long ways. And our fundamental issue is we love each other. There are ideological differences. You've got a conservative president that is about a nationalist perspective, whereas the previous administration was more of a globalistic agenda, and those things are diabolically opposed. And it really doesn't matter what the race of the man is. Hey, look, if President Trump was black and he still said the things that he said and he still had his conservative issues, we would still be at odds with each other because the ideology of the two agendas just are diametrically opposed.
Coach, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to stop you there.
Go ahead.
I think if President Trump was black, he would be impeached by now.